This ancient structure might look like a forgotten monument, just another weathered ruin lost to time. But its purpose? Still unknown. And it's not the only one. Scattered across the planet are relics so baffling, so out of place, that even today's smartest scientists are left scratching their heads. Take, for example, a stone sphere so perfectly round it challenges our understanding of ancient craftsmanship, yet it was carved long before the invention of the wheel, or underground. Passageways stretching across countries, dug with uncanny precision, yet no one can say who made them, or why. Then there's the site where massive stones, some weighing over 50 tons, were stacked and aligned without a trace of tool marks, blueprints, or even a clear purpose. These aren't myths. They're real, documented, and still resisting explanation. They defy logic, timelines, and the limits of what we thought early humans could achieve. And the deeper we dig, the stranger it all gets. These are the questions history books avoid, the anomalies science hasn't solved. And today, we're diving into 8 of the most mysterious archaeological discoveries that continue to puzzle experts to this day. These aren't just ruins. They're messages carved in stone, daring us to understand. This is 8 archaeological mysteries science is still unable to explain. We like to think we've figured out our past, that the timeline of human history is neatly mapped out, from cave dwellers to city builders, from stone tools to silicon chips. But these discoveries suggest otherwise. They don't fit the narrative. They sit at the edges of accepted history, like glitches in a system we thought was complete, structures too advanced for their era, artifacts that predate known civilizations, technologies that shouldn't exist, and yet they do. Each one is a reminder that our understanding of the past is, at best, incomplete. Science offers incredible tools, but it also relies on what we already know. And when we stumble upon something that doesn't fit the framework, the reaction isn't always clarity. It's confusion. These mysteries don't disprove science. They challenge it to dig deeper, to question assumptions, to admit when it doesn't have the answer. Because until we understand how and why these things were created, we're not uncovering the truth. We're just guessing. And maybe, just maybe, the real story of our past is far older, stranger, and more complex than we've ever imagined. The stone spheres of Costa Rica, scattered across the lush rainforests and grassy plains of Costa Rica, lie some of the most perplexing artifacts in archaeology. Massive stone spheres, some of which are nearly perfect in shape and weigh up to 15 tons. These silent giants, numbering in the hundreds, have captivated archaeologists, historians, and travelers for decades. Their size alone would be enough to spark curiosity, but it's their near-perfect geometry that raises far more questions than answers. To begin with, the sheer effort required to shape a single stone of this size into a sphere is staggering. Most of these spheres are carved from a hard, igneous rock called gabbro, which is notoriously difficult to work with, even using modern tools. Yet these artifacts were created by a culture that left behind no written language, no detailed construction, records, and, as far as we know, no advanced metal tools capable of grinding or sculpting stone with such precision. What makes the spheres truly remarkable is how uniformly spherical they are. Modern measurements have shown that some of the larger stones deviate by mere millimeters from a perfect round shape. Considering that these were likely created over 1,000 years ago, this kind of precision is difficult to reconcile with our assumptions about pre-Columbian technology in Central America. There are no flat sides, no angular cuts, no telltale marks of chisels or hammering. Just smooth, curving surfaces and symmetrical contours that seem to mock the passage of time. Even more curious is how the stones remain uncracked or unweathered despite centuries of exposure to the elements. Some were found buried under thick layers of sediment, while others were located in the open, sitting exposed for generations. Still, many remain intact and undistorted, an engineering feat, whether intentional or accidental. Were these stones somehow treated or protected? Were they meant to last forever? Then comes the problem of transport. The raw materials for the Kayab spheres were quarried miles away from where the finished stones were found. How were stones weighing several tons moved across rugged terrain without the use of wheels, beasts of burden, or cranes? There's no sign of roads or platforms. No sled tracks. No infrastructure. Just enormous orbs resting in places that suggest they were deliberately and precisely placed. Some stones have been found in lines or geometric patterns, leading some to speculate that they once formed part of a larger organized layout, perhaps a ceremonial site or astronomical alignment. Others are scattered without apparent logic, as if their original purpose has long since been erased by time, natural disaster, or colonization. Ultimately, the stone's very existence challenges our ideas about what small, ancient societies were capable of. The precision, scale, and volume of the work involved suggest a level of social organization and technical understanding that has yet to be fully acknowledged in conventional histories of the region. These aren't just rocks, they're enigmas carved in stone. Quiet, yet forceful reminders that ancient craftsmanship may still hold secrets we've barely begun to decode. Perhaps what's most frustrating and fascinating about the stone spheres of Costa Rica is the complete absence of any written explanation for why they were made. These spheres, some weighing as much as a small car, seem to have been produced with incredible effort and care, yet not a single glyph, inscription, or painted wall tells us what they were for. No stone tablet records their creation. No oral tradition has survived that definitively explains their purpose. They are, quite literally, massive questions carved into rock. The culture believed to have created these spheres is the Diquis civilization, which flourished between 700 and 1530 CE in the region now known as southern Costa Rica. The Diquis left behind intricate goldwork, pottery, and complex burial sites, but no written language. What we know of them comes primarily from archaeological, excavation, interpretation of patterns, and comparison to neighboring cultures. And even those clues are often vague or circumstantial. Early Spanish conquistadors didn't document the spheres, likely because they were buried or hidden deep within forests and had no immediate value like gold or precious stones. When banana plantations expanded in the early 20th century, heavy machinery unearthed many of the spheres, often damaging or displacing them in the process. Unfortunately, their context was lost before archaeologists could document their original positions. Without context, even the most impressive object becomes harder to understand. To make matters worse, some of the spheres were moved, stolen, or repurposed as lawn decorations by foreign collectors and wealthy landowners. This further disrupted their original placements and deprived researchers of key spatial information that could have offered insight into their intended purpose, whether they were part of ceremonial centers, aligned with celestial events, or used as markers of territory or status. Without written records, scholars have had to reverse engineer their meaning, relying on surrounding artifacts, burial sites, and construction patterns. Still, theories vary widely. Some suggest the spheres were status symbols, reserved for the elite or crafted to mark powerful community leaders. Others propose they were used in religious or spiritual rituals. More fringe theories, though widely dismissed by experts, claim extraterrestrial contact, Atlantean technology, or ancient global civilizations. These ideas, while often sensational, reflect just how open the mystery still is. Archaeologists have used modern dating techniques like radiocarbon analysis of nearby organic material, but this only offers rough timelines, not purpose. Satellite imaging and LiDAR scans have helped reconstruct some lost landscapes, revealing geometric layouts where the spheres might have once formed patterns or boundaries. Yet even these discoveries raise more questions than they answer. The silence of the stone speaks volumes. In the absence of records, we are left to speculate, to theorize, and to question. These objects, deliberately created and painstakingly shaped, were important enough to require tremendous effort, but not important enough, it seems, to leave a clear story behind. Or perhaps that story was never meant to be written down. Perhaps it was communicated in a language of symbolism, ritual, and presence, one we've long forgotten how to read. In the absence of written records or direct cultural continuity, the purpose of the Costa Rican stone spheres has become a playground for speculation, albeit informed speculation rooted in archaeological patterns, indigenous symbolism, and comparative study. Over the years, researchers and theorists alike have proposed a number of ideas to explain why these massive, carefully shaped orbs were created. Among the most discussed, astronomical markers, political or spiritual power symbols, and even ancient navigation tools. The astronomical theory is one of the most compelling. Some spheres appear to have been found in linear or geometric arrangements, alignments that suggest they could have served as rudimentary observatories or calendar markers. Similar alignments have been found in ancient sites across the globe, from Stonehenge in England to the temples of the Maya, where solstices, equinoxes, and celestial bodies played a central role in religious and agricultural life. If the spheres were positioned to track the sun's movement across the sky or to mark planting and harvest seasons, it would indicate not only an awareness of astronomy, but also the ability to design and build structures with cosmic precision. However, due to modern disturbance and displacement of the spheres, most original placements are lost, leaving this theory plausible but unconfirmed. Another dominant hypothesis is that the spheres were symbols of power and prestige. In pre-Columbian cultures throughout the Americas, leaders often commissioned large monuments or distinctive artifacts to signal their authority. The very act of creating something labor-intensive and awe-inspiring, like a flawless stone sphere, could serve as a statement of dominance. Some of the spheres were found near the remains of what appear to be important settlements or elite residences, supporting the idea that they may have functioned as political symbols or territorial markers. Their size and perfection would have impressed both locals and outsiders, reinforcing the idea that whoever controlled the spheres also controlled resources, knowledge, and labor. There's also the navigation theory, which proposes that the spheres may have been placed along trade routes, riverbanks, or pilgrimage paths to serve as directional markers or boundary indicators. In a world without written maps or signposts, visible landmarks were crucial. Large, distinctive stone spheres would have stood out in the landscape, offering travelers a visual cue or signal of proximity to a community, spiritual site, or crossroads. Similar uses of megalithic stones have been documented elsewhere, such as the standing stones of ancient Europe or boundary markers in Andean cultures. Yet again, due to relocation and lack of clear patterns, we can't prove this conclusively. While these three theories remain the most discussed in academic circles, none has emerged as definitive. It's possible that different spheres had different purposes. Some may have aligned with celestial events, while others served ritual or political roles. Or perhaps all three ideas are true in some layered cultural mosaic we no longer fully understand. In the end, these theories offer frameworks, not answers. They give shape to our curiosity, even if the stones themselves remain silent. Despite decades of research, debate, and investigation, there is still no scholarly consensus on the origin, purpose, or even the full meaning behind Costa Rica's stone spheres. That absence of agreement isn't due to lack of interest, far from it. These artifacts have attracted attention from archaeologists, geologists, historians, engineers, and even mathematicians. Yet for all our technological advancement and academic rigor, one fundamental truth remains. No one knows for certain how these near-perfect stone spheres were carved, especially without access to modern tools. The sheer craftsmanship of these objects is at odds with the technology believed to have existed in the region at the time. The Dikis culture had no iron tools, no lathes, no powered grinding devices, just basic hand tools likely made of stone or wood. And yet, they achieved a level of smoothness and symmetry that challenges even modern stoneworkers. In fact, when some modern sculptors have attempted to recreate a sphere using only pre-Columbian methods, the results have been wildly inconsistent, requiring immense time and yielding spheres that are far less precise than their ancient counterparts. Most of the spheres were crafted from gabbro, a hard volcanic rock that requires prolonged grinding and polishing to shape. The process would have involved selecting massive raw boulders from distant quarries, transporting them across rugged terrain, and then patiently shaping them using abrasion techniques, likely with sand and other stones as the grinding agents. This method might account for the basic rounding, but achieving millimeter-level symmetry without precision measurement tools remains deeply puzzling. Some have suggested that rudimentary templates or water rotation methods could have been used, though no physical evidence of such systems has been found. Adding to the mystery is the variation in size. The spheres range from a few centimeters to over 2 meters in diameter. The consistency and proportion across this range suggests not only advanced craftsmanship but also some form of scaling knowledge or proportion system. Were these measurements purely aesthetic, or did they hold deeper mathematical or symbolic meaning? Without inscriptions or associated writing systems, we can only guess. Furthermore, no practice or half-finished spheres have ever been definitively identified. This suggests that the sphere-making process may have been highly organized, secretive, or even ritualized, possibly passed down among select members of society whose knowledge disappeared over time. It also raises a strange question. If so much skill and effort were poured into these objects, why did their production suddenly stop? Was there a cultural collapse, conquest, or spiritual shift that ended their relevance? In the modern world, we often assume that ancient people were fundamentally limited by their tools, but the stone spheres force us to reconsider that assumption. Perhaps innovation wasn't always technological. Perhaps it was conceptual. These artifacts stand as enduring evidence that human ingenuity, driven by purpose we no longer understand, can achieve results that challenge even our most basic assumptions about the past. The spheres may not speak, but their silence is loud, and it's saying, there is still so much we do not know. The Hippogrium of Hal Saflieni, Malta. Beneath the quiet town of Paola in Malta lies one of the world's most mysterious underground structures, the Hippogrium of Hal Saflieni. At first glance, it's easy to overlook. There are no towering pyramids, no ornate temple facades, just an ordinary building at street level. But descend through its narrow passages and you'll find an ancient, multi-level underground complex carved entirely from solid limestone. Believed to have been built as early as 4000 BCE, the Hippogrium is not just old. It predates the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge by over 1,000 years. And to this day, no one fully understands how it was made or why. The word Hippogrium simply means underground in Greek. But this isn't a cave or a natural tunnel system. Every chamber, every corridor, every stone shelf and curved wall was carved by hand using stone tools. At a time when metal had not yet reached the Maltese Islands, even with modern machinery, replicating such an intricate space within solid rock would be a formidable task. Yet the original builders of the Hippogrium managed it with astonishing accuracy and architectural flair. The complex spans 3 levels, each deeper and more elaborate than the last. The topmost layer is thought to have been used for storage and ritual activity. The middle level, which is the most developed, contains carefully proportioned rooms, vaulted ceilings, and even a central chamber designed with precise acoustics. More on that in a later section. The deepest level descends over 10 meters below the surface and was once filled with water. Its use remains a mystery. Remarkably, the hypogeum seems to have been planned from the beginning, not expanded in stages. Its layout isn't random. Chambers radiate out from central halls. Some rooms are perfectly circular, others rectangular, and some irregular yet strangely harmonious. And unlike tombs or catacombs that are built to house the dead and little else, the hypogeum shows evidence of multifunctional use, ritual, burial, and possibly even habitation or initiation ceremonies. Over 7,000 human skeletons were once found. Here, mostly in the upper levels, suggesting it may have doubled as a necropolis. But what's more intriguing is what was found alongside the bones: delicate pottery, carved figurines, and red ochre wall paintings that still cling to the damp limestone after thousands of years. The sheer age of the hypogeum rewrites much of what we thought we knew about Neolithic Europe. It speaks of a society capable of advanced planning, engineering, and symbolic thinking, long before the so-called cradles of civilization in Mesopotamia or Egypt began building their empires. And yet, for all its complexity, the people who built the hypogeum left behind no written records, no blueprint, no explanation, no myth. Just a massive underground sanctuary carved in silence that seems to whisper a forgotten truth. Our ancestors may have been far more advanced than we give them credit for. Among the many peculiar features of the hypogeum, none have sparked more modern fascination than the so-called oracle room, a small, rounded chamber carved deep into the second level of the underground complex. At first glance, it appears similar to the other rooms: a domed ceiling, bare stone walls, no visible inscriptions. But when someone speaks or chants within this chamber, something extraordinary happens. The sound doesn't just echo, it resonates deeply, powerfully, and not just through the room, but through the entire structure, and, remarkably, through the bodies of those standing nearby. Acoustic engineers and archaeologists who've studied the oracle room have confirmed that it was intentionally designed to amplify sound in very specific ways. Frequencies between 90 and 120 hertz, within the low end of the human male vocal range, create a reverberation that pulses throughout the hypogeum like a wave. Standing in the chamber while someone speaks at that pitch, one doesn't just hear the sound, it's felt. Vibrations ripple through the chest, bones, and skin. The experience is described as immersive, even otherworldly. This has led researchers to investigate the neurological effects of exposure to sound at these frequencies. Some experiments suggest that sustained exposure to such resonance can stimulate activity in the brain's limbic system, the region associated with emotion, memory, and certain altered states of consciousness. In layman's terms, the oracle room may have been designed to produce trance-like states, deep meditation, or even spiritual visions in those who stood within it. What's truly baffling is the level of intentional design this would imply. To shape a room out of limestone in such a way that it doesn't just reflect sound, but enhances specific frequencies, requires a sophisticated understanding of acoustics. And yet the builders of the hypogeum had no known writing, no advanced tools, no access to modern concepts of wave physics. They simply knew how sound worked, possibly through generations of oral tradition, trial and error, or deep experiential knowledge, and they embedded that knowledge in stone. Some scholars believe the oracle room was used for ritual chanting, healing ceremonies, or communication with the divine. The voice, amplified and transformed by the chamber, would have sounded unlike anything in the natural world, a disembodied vibration reverberating from unseen walls. In a pitch-black underground space, lit only by flickering lamps or torches, the effect would be intense, even overwhelming. It's easy to imagine how participants might have interpreted the experience as sacred or transcendent. Interestingly, similar acoustic phenomena have been found in other ancient structures. like the temples of Chavin in Peru or Newgrange in Ireland. This suggests that knowledge of how architecture could influence consciousness through sound may have been more widespread than we realize. Still, the hypogeum's acoustic perfection remains unique. It's not just a technical marvel, it's a psychological one. And it raises a powerful question. Were our ancestors trying to speak to the gods, or to something even older, hidden within the human mind itself? For all the theories, technologies, and investigations brought to bear on the hypogeum, one truth continues to elude experts. We still don't know who built it. The structure is widely believed to have been created by the same Neolithic culture responsible for Malta's above-ground megalithic temples, places like Hagar Chim and Menajdra, known for their astronomical alignments and massive stone architecture. But while those temples bask in the Mediterranean sun, the hypogeum lies buried in darkness, physically and historically. Carbon dating places the hypogeum's earliest phase around 4000 BCE, but the culture responsible left no written records, no decipherable language, and only fragments of symbolic artifacts. What they did leave, however, is a string of impossibilities. Multi-level stone chambers carved by hand, complex architectural planning without formal blueprints, and sound dynamics, so precise they rival modern acoustic design. Who were these people, and how did they attain such refined knowledge with such limited tools? One of the greatest puzzles is the technological leap required to accomplish what the hypogeum represents. It's not just the size and depth of the chambers, it's the execution. The walls curve uniformly. The ceilings transition smoothly from vaults to domes. The stone columns and doorways are symmetrical, sometimes polished to a surprising smoothness. And nowhere is there evidence of trial and error, no unfinished corridors, no crude early attempts. Whoever designed this space seemed to know exactly what they were doing from the start. This naturally leads to one of the most enduring questions. How did they do it? The only tools available at the time were made from chert, bone, antler, or wood. These would have been used to chip away at solid limestone, a process that, by modern estimates, would take several lifetimes to complete even one level of the hypogeum. There are no signs of advanced chisels, metal blades, or construction scaffolding, and since the entire structure was dug from the top down, the workers would have been navigating increasingly confined, pitch-black spaces, relying on oil lamps and firelight just to see. And then there's the mystery of why. Why go to such extreme lengths to build underground, when above-ground structures were already proving effective for worship, gatherings, and burial? Some believe the builders may have associated the subterranean world with the afterlife, transformation, or rebirth, creating a physical descent into the spiritual unknown. Others argue that the acoustics themselves were the goal. The hypogeum may have served as a kind of sound temple, where the human voice, especially in male tones, was amplified to produce powerful psychological effects. But if that's true, then the builders didn't just understand stone, they understood human perception. Despite years of excavation and study, we have no definitive answers. No names, no origin myths, no cultural continuity to connect the hypogeum with later civilizations. Just an echoing, silent marvel buried beneath the surface of a modern town. We know it exists. We know it works. But how that knowledge was first conceived, and why it was executed with such precision, remains a mystery untouched by time. Of all the theories surrounding the hypogeum, few are as compelling or controversial as the idea that it was designed not just for ceremony or burial, but for the deliberate induction of altered states of consciousness. It may sound far-fetched at first, but the more researchers study the structure's unique sensory environment, the more plausible the idea becomes. The hypogeum is not merely a physical space, it is an immersive experience, one that seems intentionally engineered to separate the visitor from the normal rhythms of reality. Imagine descending into the hypogeum in complete darkness, save for flickering torchlight. The air is thick, still, and cool. Sound behaves differently here, amplified in some places, swallowed whole in others. The floor plan curves and bends in unexpected ways. Orientation becomes difficult. Vision is limited. Voices take on strange timbres. In such an environment, the boundaries between physical space and psychological perception begin to blur. This isn't just architecture, it's sensory manipulation. This theory has gained particular momentum in recent decades as researchers have begun exploring the intersection of archaeology and neuropsychology. In 2008, a study conducted by the Richard Strauss Institute in Germany found that exposure to resonant frequencies in the 110 Hz range, the same frequencies amplified in the hypogeum's auricle room, can affect the brain's prefrontal cortex and limbic system, which are responsible for emotional processing, memory, and the regulation of consciousness. The effects include increased theta wave activity, which is associated with meditation, intuition, and altered states. In other words, standing inside the auricle room while exposed to a sustained vocal tone at the right pitch may have literally changed how ancient people experienced their own minds. If this was intentional, and many believe it was, it suggests that the hypogeum wasn't just a tomb or a temple. It was a technological tool for spiritual transformation. Ritual chanting, guided ceremony, or solitary meditation in this space could have facilitated visionary experiences, dream states, or communion with ancestors or deities. The acoustics, the darkness, the isolation, it all forms a system designed to dissolve the ordinary sense of self and open the participant to something else, something beyond. This interpretation is further supported by the symbolic artifacts found within. Stylized figurines in trance-like poses, red ochre pigments linked to life and death rituals, and the very architecture itself, which mimics the womb-like forms found in sacred Neolithic structures across the world. Some researchers have drawn comparisons to early mystery cults, shamanic traditions, and vision quests, all spiritual systems built on the idea that controlled sensory deprivation and ritual immersion can reveal hidden layers of reality. Critics of this theory argue that it's difficult to prove intent without direct textual evidence, and that's true. But the power of the hypogeum lies in what it makes people feel. Even today, visitors report strange emotional responses, feelings of awe, anxiety, even euphoria. Whether by design or by chance, the structure manipulates perception. And for a civilization without writing, perhaps that was the ultimate form of expression, creating a space that didn't speak in words, but in experience. The Great Pyramid's internal structure, few monuments on Earth have captured the world's imagination, like the Great Pyramid of Giza. Rising over 140 meters into the desert sky, it has stood for more than 4,500 years as a symbol of ancient genius. Yet, for all our admiration, and despite countless studies, measurements, and theories, we still don't fully understand how it was built. The methods used to transport, lift, and precisely align over 2 million limestone and granite blocks remain one of history's most confounding engineering puzzles. The traditional explanation, taught for decades, is that the pyramid was constructed using ramps, either straight, zigzagging, or wrapping around the structure. But problems with this idea remain. A straight ramp long enough to reach the top would need to be over 1 kilometer long and require more material than the pyramid itself. A spiral ramp would interfere with the corners and offer little visibility for precision. Despite being one of the most studied ancient structures in the world, no physical evidence of such ramps, no remnants, no foundation lines has ever been conclusively found. And the closer you examine the details, the stranger it gets. Each of the pyramid's blocks weighs between 2 and 30 tons, with some granite slabs in the internal chambers tipping the scales at over 70 tons. These slabs were transported from Aswan, over 800 kilometers away, then lifted dozens of meters into the heart of the structure. The logistics alone are staggering. Without wheels, pulleys, or iron tools, how did ancient builders cut, move, and set these stones with such tight tolerances that even today a sheet of paper cannot fit between them? Then there's the alignment. The Great Pyramid is almost perfectly oriented to true north, within a fraction of a degree. It's also square at the base, level within a couple of centimeters, and the sides differ in length by less than 20 centimeters across 230 meters. Achieving that level of precision today would require laser leveling and satellite positioning, and yet this was done in an age with no known measuring instruments more advanced than ropes, plumb bobs, and rudimentary sighting tools. Adding to the mystery are the interior features: narrow shafts, oddly shaped chambers, and unexplained passages that seem to serve no clear purpose. The king's chamber, constructed entirely from massive granite blocks, has a relieving chamber above it to prevent the roof from collapsing under the weight. But even that engineering solution seems excessive and strangely designed, more complex than necessary. Modern researchers have tried to recreate possible construction methods using ancient tools and manpower. Most attempts fall short, often dramatically. And while new technology has helped us scan and model the pyramid with greater detail than ever before, we still don't have a universally accepted, evidence-backed explanation for how such an immense structure was built with such limited resources. In the end, the Great Pyramid is more than a monument, it's a riddle in stone. It stands not just as a symbol of ancient Egypt's power, but of human history's unanswered questions. We marvel at it because we can't fully explain it, and maybe that's what keeps it alive in our imagination. The fact that it still refuses to give up all its secrets. In 2017, a stunning revelation shook the world of Egyptology. Using a technique borrowed from particle physics, muon tomography, researchers peered deep into the Great Pyramid of Giza without laying a single hand on its ancient stones. What they discovered was astonishing: a hidden void, at least 30 meters long, situated above the Grand Gallery and completely sealed off from all known corridors. This wasn't just a minor anomaly, it was the first major internal structure discovered within the pyramid since the 19th century. Muon detection works by tracking the movement of cosmic particles, muons, that constantly shower the Earth from space. These particles can pass through solid rock, but at different rates depending on the density of the material. By placing muon detectors inside and around the pyramid, scientists created a kind of cosmic X-ray image. Where fewer muons were detected, the stone was solid. Where more passed through, it indicated empty space. And there, hidden in the heart of the pyramid, was an unmistakable signal, a vast, hollow area, completely unaccounted for in any existing architectural map. What makes this discovery so intriguing is that the void is not aligned with known chambers like the king's or queen's chamber. It doesn't appear to serve any obvious structural or functional role, and there's no accessible passage leading to it. At least, none that we know of. Its position directly above the Grand Gallery has led some to speculate that it might be a second relieving chamber designed to distribute the pyramid's immense weight. But others aren't convinced. A 30-meter empty space could have been divided, sloped, or supported differently. The sheer size of the void suggests it may have had a more intentional, even symbolic purpose. The announcement of the void sparked a wave of theories. Was this a ceremonial chamber never meant to be entered? A hidden tomb of a pharaoh or royal priestess, sealed away to preserve spiritual purity? Could it be a storage area for sacred relics or ritual items? Or something more abstract, an acoustic or energetic component of the pyramid's overall design? What made the discovery even more tantalizing was the reaction it triggered. Silence. Egyptian authorities acknowledged the finding but have since restricted further access and investigation. While this isn't uncommon, archaeological sites in Egypt are tightly controlled, it has fueled suspicion among those who believe more lies hidden within the pyramid's walls, perhaps intentionally. It's also a reminder that even after millennia of exploration, the pyramid continues to guard its secrets. For centuries, explorers had to break through stone and risk collapse just to see a few more meters into the structure. Now, with subatomic particles from outer space, we've managed to see what no human has seen since the day the last stone was placed. And yet we are left with more questions than answers. The void is real. Its size is massive. Its purpose, unknown. Just one more piece of the Great Pyramid's puzzle, one that science has only just begun to uncover. The discovery of the 30-meter-long hidden void within the Great Pyramid has reignited one of the oldest debates in Egyptology. What were these internal spaces really meant for? The traditional view holds that the pyramid was constructed as a monumental tomb for Pharaoh Khufu, a belief supported by its alignment, internal sarcophagus, and surrounding complex. But the newly revealed chamber throws a wrench into that narrative. If this massive void isn't a burial chamber, then what is it? And if it is a burial chamber, why was it completely sealed off, without a single known passage leading to or from it? One of the more conservative theories is that the void may be a pressure relief chamber, an architectural solution designed to reduce the weight on the grand gallery below. Supporters of this idea point to the fact that the king's chamber has multiple relieving chambers above it, including massive granite beams stacked in a stepped formation. The pyramid's architects clearly understood that such enormous structures required internal weight distribution. So perhaps this new void is simply another unseen element of their brilliant engineering. But this explanation comes with problems. First, the void isn't constructed like the other known relieving chambers. It doesn't contain stacked granite beams or layered ceilings, at least none detected through the muon scans. Its shape is different. It seems to be more of a large, open gallery rather than a narrow, weight-dispersing space. And perhaps most importantly, the grand gallery beneath it was already functioning without signs of collapse for over 4,000 years. Why add an extra 30-meter void that no one can access? That's led other researchers to speculate that the void may be something else entirely. An undiscovered burial chamber, possibly even the original intended resting place of Khufu himself, or a decoy designed to mislead tomb robbers. Some have theorized that the king's chamber was never actually meant to hold the pharaoh's remains, and that the real tomb lies elsewhere, sealed and undiscovered to this day. The fact that no mummy, treasure, or hieroglyphic inscriptions have ever been found inside the pyramid fuels these suspicions. What if this mysterious void is the true burial space hidden in plain sight? Then there's the possibility that the void served a symbolic or ritual function completely unrelated to death or construction logistics. Ancient Egyptians believed deeply in cosmic order, Mayat, and their monuments often reflected astronomical, mathematical, and spiritual principles. The void may have been intended as a sacred empty space, a resonance chamber, or even a spiritual passageway meant to guide the pharaoh's soul to the stars. Such symbolic architecture isn't unheard of. Across ancient Egypt, we find non-functional rooms, false doors, and symbolic niches that were never meant for human use but held deep religious meaning. Ultimately, without physical access to the void, we are left to speculate. It's a blank slate, perhaps intentionally so. Whether it was meant to bear weight, to preserve a soul, or to mystify future generations, it has succeeded in one undeniable way. It has kept the Great Pyramid's deepest secrets intact. The revelation of a massive, unexplained void inside the Great Pyramid has done more than introduce a new mystery. It has reopened the possibility that the structure still holds hidden secrets yet to be discovered. If one chamber that size could remain undetected until 2017, what else might lie behind its massive walls? The pyramid's stone blocks, stacked with extraordinary precision, have long made exploration difficult. Many of its interior corridors are sealed, unstable, or completely unknown to us. For all its scale and fame, the Great Pyramid is still, in many ways, a black box. This sense of hidden potential isn't speculation. It's supported by history. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, explorers made several accidental discoveries inside the pyramid. Hidden shafts, trapdoors, and unfinished passages that no ancient text ever mentioned. The so-called air shafts, leading out of the king's and queen's chambers, for instance, puzzled experts for decades. They don't ventilate anything, nor do they allow access, yet they were carved with care, some aiming precisely at key stars significant in Egyptian cosmology. Were they symbolic paths for the pharaoh's soul, or clues pointing to deeper architecture? Then there's the mystery of symmetry. The Great Pyramid is almost unnaturally precise, with its four sides, aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. This geometrical consistency suggests a high degree of planning, and perhaps a level of internal symmetry that hasn't been fully explored. If a void was discovered on one side of the Grand Gallery, is there a corresponding chamber on the other side? Are there parallel passages, hidden niches, or even entire rooms concealed within the millions of tons of stone? Some experts believe so. The muon scan that revealed the 30-meter void was limited in scope. More recent proposals call for full-body scans of the pyramid using enhanced particle tracking, thermal imaging, and seismic echo mapping. These tools could potentially reveal variations in temperature, sound reverberation, and mass distribution. Subtle cues that may hint at more anomalies within the structure. But progress is slow. Access to the pyramid is tightly restricted, and Egyptian authorities are cautious about invasive technologies or public speculation. Still, pressure is building in the academic community for a deeper look, literally and figuratively. Outside of formal academia, the lack of answers continues to fuel fringe theories. Secret chambers holding ancient scrolls, lost technologies, even connections to Atlantis. While such claims are almost always exaggerated or entirely baseless, their popularity speaks to a deeper truth. The pyramid still feels unfinished in our minds, not because it is physically incomplete, but because our understanding of it remains frustratingly shallow. It's easy to think of the Great Pyramid as a solved monument, a relic cataloged and conquered by history books, but the reality is quite different. Each new scan, each fresh discovery, only deepens the mystery. If a 30-meter chamber could remain hidden for thousands of years, what else might be waiting behind those perfectly cut stones? Perhaps something small, perhaps something enormous. But one thing is clear: the pyramid has not yet told us everything it knows. The underground megalithic tunnels of Europe. Beneath the soil of Europe lies a forgotten network, one that challenges our understanding of prehistoric life and human connectivity. Across Germany, Austria, and even as far north as Scotland, archaeologists have uncovered traces of ancient underground tunnels that stretch for kilometers through stone, silently linking regions, cultures, and centuries. These are not natural caves or accidental formations. They were carved by human hands, tunnels just wide enough for a person to squeeze through, sometimes only shoulder height, sometimes reinforced with stone slabs and lined with intricate markings. The scale of the system is staggering, and its implications are profound. The earliest of these tunnels date back to the Neolithic period, around 5,000 years ago. This was a time when most of Europe's population lived in small, scattered farming communities. Yet someone, over multiple generations, decided to dig narrow passageways through the bedrock, stretching beneath hills, fields, and even rivers. In Bavaria alone, over 700 meters of these ancient tunnels have been documented, with more discovered each year. In Austria, similar shafts twist and turn under hillsides, while in the British Isles, structures like souterrain, subterranean, stone passages suggest a shared architectural concept. This isn't just a case of parallel development. While the tunnels are not continuous from one country to another, they show remarkable similarities in structure, construction technique, and size. Most are between 50 and 70 centimeters wide and 1 to 1.5 meters tall, just enough for a human to move through in a crouched or crawling position. In some places, small chambers branch off the main route, offering space to rest, store supplies, or perhaps hide. The uniformity is uncanny. It's as though distant communities, separated by geography and language, were working from a common blueprint. But how could such coordination have occurred at a time when long-distance travel was rare and communication even more so? The answer remains elusive. Some scholars suggest that these tunnels were built gradually over centuries by independent groups who shared a spiritual or cultural motivation. Others argue that there may have been a larger, more organized effort, a kind of pan-European tradition of subterranean engineering now lost to history. And then comes the question of purpose. Were these passageways meant for travel, defense, ritual, escape? Some researchers believe they offered safe movement between villages during times of conflict or environmental stress. Others propose more symbolic functions, gateways between the living and the dead, or sacred routes walked by shamans during vision quests. The presence of megalithic structures like standing stones and dolmens near many tunnel sites only deepens the mystery, hinting at a broader ceremonial landscape. What's clear is this: these tunnels are not isolated anomalies. They are part of a much larger continent-spanning enigma, one carved in stone and forgotten beneath our feet. The fact that so many have survived hidden just below the surface raises a haunting question. If this is what we've found so far, how much more still lies undiscovered? The tunnels are not merely old, they are prehistoric, dug thousands of years ago at a time when most societies were still developing basic farming, tool-making, and settlement structures. That such monumental work was undertaken not above ground but beneath it only adds to the sense of wonder. These subterranean passageways weren't the product of advanced tools or heavy machinery. They were excavated by hand, through solid rock, using the most rudimentary implements available at the time: stone picks, antler tools, and possibly fire-hardening techniques. The patience, endurance, and precision required to carve out such spaces is nearly unimaginable by modern standards. To put it in perspective, digging even a few meters of tunnel through compacted soil and stone with nothing more than bone or flint tools would take weeks. Now scale that up to networks that stretch for kilometers, some with turns, chambers, and even ventilation-like shafts. It would have taken decades, if not generations, of continuous work. Why commit so much time and effort to such a physically demanding, low-visibility task? This question becomes even more poignant when considering the environments the tunnels cut through. These weren't soft sandstone regions. Many of the passages were carved through granite or dense clay, both incredibly resistant to manual excavation. And yet the walls are often smooth, uniform, and structurally sound even thousands of years later. In several places, the ceilings remain perfectly intact, an indication that the builders understood weight distribution and geological pressure, at least intuitively. Accidental cave-ins appear to have been rare. That kind of reliability requires a sophisticated sense of structure, even if no formal blueprints existed. In Austria and Bavaria, some of the better preserved tunnel systems include side alcoves and low doors, carved openings that suggest intentional compartmentalization. These weren't random burrows. They were designed. Some areas feature slight widening in the passages, indicating spots where two people could pass or rest. Other sections show evidence of having been sealed or reopened, possibly in times of conflict or ritual closure. The scale of the labor involved suggests something more than individual families digging shelter. It implies communal effort, long-term, planning, and possibly even intergenerational transmission of tunnel-building knowledge. In societies without writing, That knowledge would have been passed down orally or through apprenticeship. And yet, the uniformity across different regions and countries makes it difficult to believe this was purely local or tribal. The methods and the motivation appear to have been shared on a level we still don't fully understand. There's also the unsettling silence in the archaeological record. Despite the complexity of the tunnels, there are virtually no written myths, drawings, or stories explicitly referencing their construction. If they were sacred, why did oral traditions fail to preserve their meaning? If they were utilitarian, why do they often go far beyond what practicality would require? Ultimately, their very existence defies our assumptions about what early humans were capable of, and what they cared enough to build. The stone on the surface may tell us how people lived, but these tunnels, carved in darkness and secrecy, hint at how they thought. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding Europe's ancient tunnels is also the most basic. Why were they built in the first place? Despite decades of research, excavations, and regional comparisons, no single explanation has emerged to definitively answer the question. Archaeologists, historians, and theorists have offered a range of ideas, some grounded in pragmatism, others drifting into the symbolic or speculative. Yet none of them fully account for the scale, consistency, and secrecy surrounding these narrow, painstakingly carved passageways. One of the most frequently proposed explanations is that the tunnels served as refuge, emergency shelters carved into the landscape to protect people during raids, invasions, or times of environmental instability. In Neolithic and early Bronze Age Europe, tribal conflict and regional tensions were common. A hidden underground escape route, complete with small chambers and choke points, would have provided a secure place to hide from enemies or wild animals. The low ceilings and narrow passages could also have worked as natural defenses. Any attacker entering would have to crawl or crouch, vulnerable and disoriented in the dark. But this theory only works in specific regions. In some tunnel networks, the effort far exceeds what would be needed for basic shelter or short-term refuge. In others, there's no evidence of fire pits, food storage, or long-term habitation. These weren't underground homes or bunkers in the modern sense. They were something else. That leads to the second theory, ritual or spiritual use. The darkness, silence, and isolation of the tunnels suggest they may have been used in rites of passage, shamanic ceremonies, or symbolic journeys mimicking death and rebirth. Some tunnels appear deliberately difficult to navigate, twisting, narrowing, or suddenly opening into small alcoves where offerings may have been left. In several sites, archaeologists have found intentionally broken pottery, burnt bones, and traces of red ochre, a substance commonly associated with fertility and burial rites in prehistoric cultures. In this context, crawling through the earth may have symbolized a return to the womb or a journey into the underworld. The effort required to enter and exit such a space, combined with the sensory deprivation it provided, may have created a powerful psychological experience, something akin to a spiritual transformation. These weren't just tunnels, they were thresholds. A third theory suggests a logistical or trade-related function. Some researchers have speculated that the tunnels served as parts of ancient road systems, protected paths that connected settlements, trade hubs, or sacred sites across vast distances. Though the tunnels are not continuously connected from one country to another, some alignments and clustering patterns suggest a broader network, possibly used seasonally or for specific purposes like pilgrimages. This idea raises fascinating possibilities about prehistoric connectivity, that isolated tribes may have shared not only goods, but knowledge, beliefs, and architectural methods. Still, each theory leaves gaps. Refuge doesn't explain ceremonial artifacts. Ritual use doesn't account for the sheer distance covered. Trade networks don't need such narrow, physically demanding passageways. The truth may lie in a combination of purposes or in a forgotten meaning entirely. Whatever their role, the tunnels resist simple categorization. They hint at complexity, at layers of intention lost in time, and that may be the clearest clue of all. These structures were not built on impulse. They were planned, they were meaningful, and they were meant to last. If there's one aspect of these ancient tunnels that elevates them from impressive to truly confounding, it's their sheer geographic scale. These underground networks don't belong to a single site, tribe, or even era. They stretch across vast swaths of Europe, from southern Germany to the Scottish Highlands, appearing beneath hillsides, near megalithic monuments, and sometimes right under modern farmland. They were built in different countries by different people at different times, and yet they exhibit startlingly similar construction methods, dimensions, and patterns. That kind of consistency raises a pressing question. Was there some form of regional coordination happening thousands of years before writing, roads, or formal governments? This notion of pan-European communication during the Neolithic might sound far-fetched, but the tunnels themselves demand the possibility be taken seriously. While not connected in a literal, continuous chain, many of these passageways are distributed in a web-like pattern, sometimes clustering near ritual sites, sometimes dotting the landscape at regular intervals as if forming a once recognizable system. Some archaeologists have even mapped out long corridors of tunnel sites that suggest possible travel routes or shared cultural zones. Could ancient peoples, separated by language and terrain, have maintained an unspoken architectural tradition? If so, it implies organization on a scale we don't typically associate with prehistoric Europe. These were not centralized empires or vast kingdoms. These were small, often semi-nomadic communities navigating a world with no cities, no wheels, and no metallurgy, and yet they may have been communicating, directly or indirectly, through shared knowledge and sacred tradition. How was this knowledge passed along? Through seasonal gatherings, itinerant builders, oral storytelling preserved over generations? None of these possibilities are easy to prove, but each gains credibility the more tunnel systems we discover. Some researchers point to the possibility of a priestly or spiritual class, a group of early shamans, astronomers, or architects who traveled between tribes, carrying sacred knowledge like living archives. The uniformity in tunnel dimensions, often just wide enough for a single human to crawl, and the repeating elements like small chambers and stone linings suggest adherence to a kind of unwritten code. Perhaps it wasn't a centralized plan, but a shared belief, a mythos, a ritual protocol, or a spiritual imperative that compelled people across the continent to dig in the same way for the same reasons. Others offer a more pragmatic theory, a survival system passed down across millennia. As climate changed and regional tensions flared, people may have remembered that the safest place to be was underground. The knowledge of how to build those places became communal wisdom, like knowing where to find water or when to plant crops. But the most intriguing possibility of all is that we're only seeing fragments of a much larger whole. Many of these tunnels remain buried, undocumented, or destroyed by modern development. If more were found, linking even more regions, the case for prehistoric coordination would only grow stronger. And then the final question emerges: who was guiding it? A lost civilization? A common religious origin? Or a forgotten chapter of our own human story, one still waiting to be unearthed? The Tiwanaku Gateway of the Sun, Bolivia, high in the Bolivian Andes near the shores of Lake Titicaca, lies a sprawling archaeological site called Tiwanaku, once home to a powerful and mysterious pre-Incan civilization. At its center stands a monument that has puzzled historians, engineers, and astronomers for generations: the Gateway of the Sun. Carved from a single piece of andesite stone, weighing over 10 tons, this megalithic arch is not merely an impressive feat of prehistoric engineering. It is an enigma chiseled in stone, rich in symbolism, perfectly aligned and hauntingly silent. What makes the gateway so remarkable isn't just its scale, though carving, moving, and erecting a 10-ton monolith at an altitude of over 3,800 meters without metal tools or the wheel is, by any measure, astonishing. It's the precision. The lines, edges, and engravings on the gateway are incredibly sharp and geometrically consistent, as though shaped with tools far beyond the stone or copper implements thought to be available at the time. Even today, modern stonemasons acknowledge that reproducing such clean cuts and straight angles, especially in andesite, an extremely hard volcanic rock, would require significant effort and technology. The gateway is not simply a decorative arch. It was clearly designed with intent, its face engraved with intricate bas-reliefs, including a central figure often called the staff god, surrounded by 48 smaller winged beings, some with human faces, others with condor-like heads. This iconography, distinct from later Incan religious art, suggests a belief system and cosmology that has yet to be fully understood. Some scholars believe the central figure represents Viracocha, a creator deity revered across the Andes, while others think it may predate that mythology altogether. What's particularly strange is that the gateway now stands freestanding, exposed, and slightly tilted, as if lifted from its original context. Archaeologists theorize that it once formed part of a much larger wall or temple complex, perhaps serving as an astronomical marker or ceremonial portal. Its orientation and carvings hint at solar alignment, especially during the solstices, reinforcing the theory that the monument functioned as a calendar or observatory. Yet no one knows exactly how old it is. Some date the gateway to around 500–1000 CE, during Tiwanaku's peak, while others, especially fringe theorists, argue it may be much older, possibly a remnant of a lost civilization. The erosion patterns and incomplete carvings have fueled speculation that the structure was damaged in antiquity, perhaps by a cataclysmic event like an earthquake. If true, that might explain its current solitary state, less a completed portal, more a broken fragment of something once vast and deeply symbolic. To this day, the Gateway of the Sun remains a riddle. It stands not just as a relic of Andean history, but as a challenge. How did a people with no written language or known advanced tools create such a monument? And why does it echo the themes of time, sun, and divinity with such deliberate force? Like so many ancient wonders, it offers no clear answers. Only the enduring sense that its builders knew something we've long forgotten. The Gateway of the Sun isn't just a stone arch. It's a codex in stone, a dense visual language etched across its face that seems to defy modern interpretation. At its center is a prominent deity-like figure, usually referred to as the staff god. This being, with a rectangular face, staring eyes, and rays emanating from its head like a solar crown, holds a scepter or staff in each hand. Its posture is static, regal, almost mechanical, unlike the flowing human forms found in many other ancient artistic traditions. Surrounding it are 3 rows of 48 winged figures, all facing the central god, arranged with such symmetry and repetition that it's impossible to dismiss them as mere decoration. What do these symbols mean? No one knows for sure. Some believe the central figure is Viracocha, the Andean creator deity, said to have fashioned the sun, moon, stars, and mankind itself before retreating into the Pacific Ocean. But the gateway predates Incan records by centuries, possibly by millennia. This has led to speculation that the monument represents a proto-mythology, the foundation of a belief system that influenced later civilizations, but whose original stories have been lost to time. What adds to the mystery is that the arrangement of figures and symbols on the gateway is not random. Many researchers believe it functions as a solar calendar, marking astronomical events such as solstices and equinoxes. The rays emanating from the staff god's head resemble the sun's corona, while the winged figures, some human-headed, some bird-headed, are thought to represent days, months, or even phases of celestial bodies. The layout seems to encode cycles of time, possibly blending solar and lunar systems, though no decoding has proven conclusive. Further evidence for astronomical purpose comes from the gateway's orientation. Though its current position may have shifted over centuries due to earthquakes or site disturbance, earlier studies suggest it was originally aligned to track the movements of the sun during key parts of the year. Some scholars argue that during the summer solstice, sunlight may have passed directly through the portal, illuminating specific carvings or aligning with distant points in the Tiwanaku complex, implying that the gateway was more than symbolic. It was functional. However, attempts to definitively interpret the iconography have stalled due to one glaring absence. There's no written record. The Tiwanaku people left behind no language that we can read, no Rosetta Stone to translate the meanings of their gods, symbols, or measurements. Every attempt to decode the gateway has been made through comparative mythologies, solar observations, and informed guesswork. As such, it sits in a strange space between science and story, a beautiful object clearly crafted with intent, but whose message remains locked behind an uncrackable visual code. Is it a calendar, a creation myth, a ritual tool? Perhaps it is all of these at once, or perhaps it conveys a concept we've lost entirely, a cosmic system of meaning, preserved in stone, waiting for us to remember how to read it. At over 3,800 meters above sea level, the Bolivian high plateau, known as the Altiplano, is not a forgiving place to build. Oxygen levels are low, the climate is harsh, and seasonal extremes can make even basic survival a challenge. Yet it was here, on this isolated plain near the edge of Lake Titicaca, that the Tiwanaku civilization not only built a city, but carved monumental structures that defy explanation. Chief among them is the Gateway of the Sun, a 10-ton monolith of solid andesite stone, so precisely cut and carefully placed that its existence raises fundamental questions about the technological capabilities of its creators. How was such a massive block quarried, transported, and lifted into place without metal tools, wheels, or pack animals strong enough to handle such a load? The nearest known andesite quarry lies several kilometers away, and the Tiwanaku people, as far as we know, did not have access to beasts of burden like llamas in numbers capable of moving stones of this size. Nor did they possess iron tools or pulleys. The logistics alone, cutting a flawless slab, transporting it across uneven terrain, and erecting it upright with millimeter precision, require answers that traditional archaeology has yet to fully provide. Adding to the enigma is the carving itself. Andesite is a particularly hard volcanic stone, tougher than granite. Attempting to shape it with primitive tools made of copper or stone should result in rough edges, uneven surfaces, or fractured corners. Yet the gateway is sharply cut. The lines are straight. The reliefs are uniform in depth and spacing. There's a geometric consistency that hints at either an incredible degree of craftsmanship or a method we haven't fully identified. In fact, some corners and joints on other stones at Tiwanaku exhibit an almost machine-like quality. The precision is so notable that modern stonemasons have commented on its complexity with a sense of disbelief. Then there's the altitude factor. Building at over 12,000 feet is a challenge for modern construction crews, let alone pre-industrial societies. Tools wear faster, workers fatigue quickly, and even fire behaves differently due to reduced oxygen. Yet this civilization flourished here, not just surviving, but producing complex architecture, intricate iconography, and extensive urban planning. The Gateway of the Sun, perched among this complexity, seems to have demanded resources and knowledge far beyond what is typically attributed to its era. Some suggest the carving may have been done over generations, a product of long-term communal labor passed down through tradition. Others speculate on lost techniques, perhaps involving abrasives, high-frequency sound, or unknown metallurgy. More fringe theories propose intervention by an earlier, more advanced culture, possibly now lost to time, or even extraterrestrial. Contact. These claims are, of course, unproven and controversial, but the fact that they persist reflects just how deep the mystery runs. One thing is certain: whatever tools or techniques were used, they've left little trace behind. No experimental archaeology has yet recreated the gateway with complete accuracy, using only tools known to the Tiwanaku. Until we can, the monument stands as both a technological marvel and a historical provocation, daring us to rethink what we believe about ancient human capability. To fully grasp the mystery of the Gateway of the Sun, one must look beyond the stone itself and into the city that once surrounded it. Tiwanaku wasn't just a ceremonial center, it was a sacred metropolis, filled with platforms, sunken plazas, precision-cut blocks, and monolithic statues. Archaeologists believe it served as the capital of a vast pre-Incan civilization that influenced cultures across the Andes. Within this context, the gateway appears less as a solitary monument and more as a piece of a larger cosmological puzzle. One, possibly used to track time, guide rituals, or mark sacred cycles. The layout of Tiwanaku shows clear signs of astronomical alignment. Certain structures and sight lines correspond with solstices, equinoxes, and lunar phases. Researchers have proposed that the city may have functioned as a kind of open-air observatory, where solar and lunar events were not just tracked, but celebrated and encoded into architecture. The gateway, positioned to face the rising sun, likely played a role in this celestial choreography. Some believe that on key days of the year, particularly during the June solstice, sunlight would pass through, or around the monument in a way that aligned with other markers in the city. The carvings on the gateway reinforce this theory. The staff god, central to the relief, is flanked by 48 winged figures. Some interpret this as a representation of the solar year, with the figures representing 12 months of 30 days each, plus intercalary days used to sync with celestial cycles. The combination of solar rays, winged attendants, and geometric precision suggests a culture deeply invested in timekeeping, not just for agricultural purposes, but for spiritual and societal order. There is also the question of ritual. Tiwanaku was not merely an observational site, it was a center of religious life, where ceremonies likely tied the heavens to the fate of the people. The gateway, possibly serving as a symbolic threshold, may have been used in initiations, solstice rituals, or rites of passage. Walking through the arch may have represented movement from one spiritual state to another, life to afterlife, chaos to order, ignorance to enlightenment. In Andean cosmology, portals and transitions hold deep meaning, and few physical objects embody that more powerfully than the gateway itself. Further supporting this is the site's original complexity. Scholars believe the gateway did not always stand where it does today. It was likely part of a vast wall or temple facade, perhaps the Kalasasaya complex, where solar pillars and ceremonial platforms once formed a massive ritual space. If true, the gateway may have marked a central axis in Tiwanaku's sacred geometry, forming a link between the earthly and the divine, between ritual and celestial motion. Despite centuries of weathering, vandalism, and incomplete excavation, the Gateway of the Sun still radiates intent. It was not created as art for its own sake. It was functional, symbolic, and deeply integrated into a larger worldview, one that connected people, time, space, and the stars into a single harmonious system. The Yonaguni Monument, Japan. Off the southern coast of Japan, near Yonaguni Island in the Ryukyu archipelago, lies one of the most controversial archaeological sites in the world, not on land, but beneath the waves. Submerged roughly 25 meters, underwater is a vast stone formation that has come to be known as the Yonaguni Monument. Measuring over 150 meters in length and rising about 27 meters from the seabed, it appears to consist of massive flat terraces, right-angled steps, vertical walls, and symmetrical platforms, all carved into what looks like a single massive block of sandstone. At first glance, it resembles a man-made ziggurat or pyramid, frozen in time and sunk into the sea. But is it really artificial? That question has divided scientists and explorers for decades. First discovered in 1986 by local diver Kihachiro Aratake, the structure quickly gained attention from marine geologists and amateur archaeologists alike. The formation is enormous, far larger than any known stone carving in Japan. It features sweeping staircases, what appear to be corridors, flat platforms resembling roads, and even what some claim is a face, a weathered angular form that evokes a human profile carved into stone. Supporters of the man-made hypothesis argue that the monument bears too many signs of deliberate engineering to be natural. The angles are often precise 90-degree cuts. The steps are evenly spaced. Certain blocks appear to have been moved or separated. There are triangular indentations that look like tool marks and flat surfaces where one would expect erosion to produce irregularity. To them, the Yonaguni monument is the flooded remnant of an ancient city or temple, possibly belonging to a lost civilization predating recorded Japanese history. One of the most cited proponents of this view is marine geologist Professor Masaki Kimura, who spent years surveying the site. Kimura believes that Yonaguni is part of a sunken city dating back more than 10,000 years, before the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were significantly lower. He has identified what he claims are staircases, plazas, roads, and even stone carvings resembling animals and symbols. According to Kimura, the site may have once stood above water, serving as the center of a now-lost Pacific culture, perhaps even linked to legends of Mu, the so-called Atlantis of the East. However, many geologists disagree. They argue that the Yonaguni Formation is a natural product of tectonic activity and erosion. The island sits along a seismically active fault line where earthquakes and shifting plates cause rock to fracture in straight lines. Combined with the brittle nature of sandstone and the effects of ocean currents, the sharp edges and flat surfaces may be coincidental, not intentional. What looks like stairs or platforms may simply be the work of time and nature. Still, the monument continues to attract curiosity, not just for what it might be, but because of how much we still don't know about the coastal civilizations of prehistoric Japan. Whether natural or artificial, or perhaps a mix of both, the Yonaguni Monument remains one of the world's most intriguing underwater enigmas. At the heart of the Yonaguni Monument debate lies a scientific and philosophical divide. How do we define what is man-made? The structure's dramatic geometry, flat platforms, step-like terraces, and vertical walls has fueled arguments on both sides. Some see it as definitive proof of an ancient civilization lost to the sea. Others insist it's a geological coincidence, born of natural processes over thousands of years. The truth, so far, remains elusive, caught in the murky waters of interpretation, evidence, and professional skepticism. On the natural formation side, many geologists point to the region's tectonic activity. Yonaguni lies within the Pacific Ring of Fire, a zone known for earthquakes, volcanic activity, and rapidly shifting sea floors. It's entirely plausible, they argue, that the sandstone forming the monument fractured along vertical and horizontal lines, a phenomenon known as conchoidal fracturing. This type of breakage often produces rectangular blocks, especially in brittle rock layers subjected to long-term pressure and movement. Over time, erosion from waves and currents would have smoothed and flattened some of these surfaces, making them appear deliberate. Natural faults can form sharp angles, and rising sea levels after the last ice age would have submerged any exposed formations. From this perspective, the monument is a stunning but completely natural marine landscape. but supporters of the man-made theory push back, citing features that seem too precise, too intentional to be the result of geology alone. Professor Masaki Kimura, one of the monument's most vocal defenders, has mapped out what he claims are staircases, roads, platforms, and even an amphitheater-like area. He also claims to have found carvings resembling animals, like a turtle or a bird, and geometric symbols that suggest human handiwork. Kimura has even identified what he believes are remnants of stone tools and post holes, indicating the placement of wooden structures that have long since decayed. If Kimura's dating is correct, the Yonaguni monument could be over 10,000 years old, placing it among the oldest known structures on Earth, far predating the pyramids of Egypt or the temples of Mesopotamia. This would imply the existence of a highly advanced society in Japan during the late Pleistocene, capable of large-scale stone construction. Such a discovery would radically reshape our understanding of human history in East Asia. However, critics argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and so far, the findings have not been published in peer-reviewed journals with rigorous archaeological standards. Much of the evidence remains interpretive, based on visual surveys and underwater photography. Without definitive artifacts, like pottery, bones, or confirmed inscriptions, it's difficult to prove that Yonaguni is anything more than a remarkable natural formation. Yet even among skeptics, there's a growing recognition that the monument deserves deeper investigation. The site lies in a gray area between geology and archaeology, where our assumptions about prehistoric capability may be blinding us to what really happened. Whether it's an ancient construction, a fluke of erosion, or something in between, Yonaguni forces us to question how we read the land and the sea as records of the past. One of the greatest frustrations surrounding the Yonaguni monument is the absence of conclusive artifacts. Despite its immense size and striking geometric features, no pottery, tools, bones, or written inscriptions have been recovered directly from the site to definitively tie it to human activity. This lack of context has left researchers in a paradox. The formation looks engineered, but lacks the archaeological signature typically associated with ancient construction. In conventional archaeology, artifacts are the connective tissue between theory and fact. They tell us who was there, what they were doing, how they lived, and what technologies they used. At Yonaguni, there's none of that. Divers have explored the terraces, steps, and angular crevices in search of anything unmistakably crafted by human hands. While small stone tools and peculiar fragments have been reported by proponents of the man-made theory, none have been universally accepted as definitive proof, either because of their ambiguous shape or because they were not found in situ, in an undisturbed archaeological layer. Yet, despite the absence of artifacts, the structure itself behaves like a monument. Its steps are uniform in height and spacing. Its platforms are aligned on near-perfect horizontal planes. Some vertical, faces meet horizontal planes at 90-degree angles so precisely that even natural fracturing seems improbable. There are trench-like grooves that resemble channels or pathways, and depressions that look suspiciously like post holes, potentially used to support wooden beams or poles. If these were found on land, especially in combination with tools or ceramics, they would likely be interpreted as architectural remnants. So why hasn't anything else been found? One possible explanation is the passage of extreme time. If the Yonaguni structure is over 10,000 years old, as some researchers suggest, it would date back to a period before the established Neolithic cultures in East Asia. At that time, sea levels were 100 meters lower than they are today. If Yonaguni was above water during that era, any nearby settlements or temples could have been washed away by the post-glacial flooding that submerged coastlines worldwide. Organic materials like wood and textiles would have decayed long ago, leaving only the hardest structures behind, those cut in stone. Another possibility is that the cultural context has been erased. Unlike Egyptian or Mesopotamian civilizations, which left abundant written records, the hypothetical builders of Yonaguni, if they existed, may not have had a writing system. They may have been oral cultures, passing down knowledge through generations without ever documenting their engineering methods in ways we could recover. If the monument served a spiritual or ritual purpose, it's possible that very few artifacts were ever left there to begin with. The idea that something so immense and so geometric could have been crafted and yet leave no material trace of its builders is both unsettling and exhilarating. It defies the archaeological rulebook. It asks us to consider, what if the monument itself is the artifact? What if the signature of a vanished culture lies not in scattered tools, but in the silent logic of shaped stone? The stakes surrounding the Yonaguni monument are immense. If the structure is ultimately proven to be man-made, it wouldn't just be an archaeological oddity, it would upend our understanding of civilization in the Pacific region and perhaps the world. The mainstream timeline places the rise of advanced human societies, complete with stone architecture, urban planning, and astronomy, around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, with centers in Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China. But Yonaguni hints at the existence of something far older and far more mysterious, sitting on the edge of the Asian continent. The implications are staggering. If human hands shaped this monument more than 10,000 years ago, before the end of the last ice age, that would mean complex architectural knowledge existed thousands of years earlier than previously believed. It would suggest that prehistoric coastal cultures in the Pacific were far more advanced than we've credited them with, possessing the ability not only to carve massive stone formations, but to do so with design, geometry, and intent. This wouldn't be a minor adjustment to our historical narrative. It would be a recalibration of our entire understanding of prehistory. The idea that sophisticated stonework, possibly involving astronomical alignment and monumental scale, emerged independently in East Asia at such an early time challenges the belief that civilization began in a few isolated cradles and slowly radiated outward. Instead, it raises the possibility of multiple centers of innovation, including one now submerged beneath the Pacific Ocean. It would also breathe life into long-dismissed legends, particularly the Pacific myth of Mu, a supposed lost continent, said to have sunk beneath the ocean. While mainstream historians regard Mu as pseudoscience, the visual and structural impact of Yonaguni has revived such stories in the popular imagination. If nothing else, the site forces us to reconsider whether some myths might preserve distant echoes of real forgotten events, catastrophes, floods, and the collapse of coastal cultures swallowed by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. More critically, it would signal how vulnerable coastal civilizations are to erasure. If Yonaguni once stood above water, any evidence of its creators, cities, tools, graves, traditions, may now lie hundreds of meters offshore or deep beneath sediment. It reminds us that the ocean is not just a vast body of water, but a vault of buried history, where countless stories of human achievement may have been lost to rising tides. And perhaps most provocatively, Yonaguni invites us to question the limits of our assumptions. How many other submerged monuments lie undiscovered across the planet's 70% water-covered surface? How much of what we take as known history is simply what happened to survive? Whether natural, man-made, or something in between, the Yonaguni monument is a monument to our ignorance as much as to ancient ingenuity, and if it was shaped by humans, it could become the first great city of the sea, and a reminder that history, like stone, can be both enduring and deeply buried. The Baalbek megaliths, Lebanon, tucked in the Bka Valley of Lebanon, stands one of the most imposing architectural enigmas in human history. Baalbek. Today, the site is famous for its colossal Roman temples, dedicated to Jupiter, Bacchus, and Venus. But beneath those ruins lies something even more astonishing, a set of megalithic stone blocks so massive, so perfectly shaped, that modern engineers still marvel at their existence. The most legendary of them, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, is estimated to weigh over 1,000 tons, making it the largest known quarried stone block ever attempted to be moved by humans. And it's not the only one. Just meters away, other megaliths of comparable size rest partly buried beneath soil and rubble. Some estimates place their weights between 800 and 1,200 tons. That's the equivalent of a modern passenger jet or a small naval ship. To put this into perspective, the blocks used in the Great Pyramid of Giza weigh between 2 and 80 tons. Baalbek's stones dwarf them. And unlike the pyramids, which were built from stacked blocks, these massive stones were seemingly intended to be moved intact and possibly even lifted into position as foundation elements. Yet no historical records exist explaining how these behemoths were carved, moved, or aligned. The stones are cut with surprising accuracy, featuring flat surfaces and near-perfect 90-degree angles. They were quarried from a site just a few hundred meters away from the main temple complex. A short distance on paper, but a logistical nightmare in practice. Imagine dragging a 1,000-ton monolith over uneven terrain without wheels, cranes, or modern lifting equipment. We don't even have conclusive evidence for the tools used to cut the stone, though it's likely they were some form of bronze or iron chisels. But how did ancient builders prevent the blocks from cracking under their own weight during transport? Conventional explanations often attribute the work to Roman engineers, who were indeed capable of impressive feats. The Romans built massive aqueducts, amphitheaters, and cities stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. However, the size of Baalbek's megaliths exceeds even the largest Roman construction norms. And there's a deeper complication. The stones predate Roman occupation. Archaeologists believe that when the Romans arrived, they found the megalithic platform already in place and chose to build their temple complex on top of it. This raises an even more puzzling question. Who cut and moved the stones before the Romans, and why? The lack of inscriptions, cultural identifiers, or matching structures elsewhere makes it nearly impossible to credit the megaliths to a known civilization. The stones stand not just as physical anomalies, but as chronological orphans, monuments without clear parentage, too advanced for the era they appear to belong to. These stones aren't simply large. They represent a feat so extreme that even today, with all our cranes, trucks, and precision tools moving them intact, would be a major engineering challenge. The fact that someone attempted it thousands of years ago without leaving behind a manual, or even a myth, is what elevates Baalbek from a marvel to a mystery. To carve and shape a 1,000-ton stone is one thing, but to move it, and possibly lift and place it within a larger structure, is another entirely. And yet, at Baalbek, we're faced with the undeniable fact that ancient builders not only quarried stones of unimaginable weight, but also intended to transport them and set them into precise architectural alignment. How they achieved this, using the tools and technologies presumed to be available thousands of years ago, remains one of the great engineering riddles of the ancient world. The prevailing theory is that rollers and manpower were used to move the stones from the quarry to the temple complex. But even this begins to break down under scrutiny. For one, no wooden rollers or sledges capable of withstanding the crushing weight of a 1,000-ton monolith have ever been found at the site or described in historical records. And while ancient cultures did move heavy stones, such as the Egyptians with obelisks, they typically worked with blocks far lighter than what we see at Baalbek. Moreover, the route between the quarry and the temple is not flat. The terrain rises slightly and includes dips and angles that would make maneuvering such massive stones nearly impossible using primitive means. Add to that the risk of the stone cracking under stress, or the logistical challenge of keeping it level and on course, and the conventional explanations start to strain credibility. Some theorists have proposed that counterweight systems or inclined planes might have been used, but again, there's no archaeological evidence supporting these. Others have speculated about lubricated stone tracks or water-assisted transport, though these ideas remain speculative. Even modern cranes would struggle to lift something of this magnitude without specialized equipment. So how did ancient builders, presumably without iron tools, concrete, or hydraulics, accomplish it? It's important to consider intent here, too. These weren't mistakes or experimental blocks abandoned halfway. The massive stones were deliberately cut, shaped, and in some cases moved into position as the base platform of the temple complex. That strongly implies a system, a method, even if we no longer understand it. This wasn't an isolated achievement, it was repeatable, at least at this one extraordinary site. There's another layer of mystery. Some of the largest stones were never moved at all. They remain half buried in the quarry, suggesting that the builders may have abandoned the effort, perhaps due to structural failure, changing leadership, or environmental disaster. Or, some theorize, they left them as monuments of skill or as ritual objects in their own right. But those that did make the journey now sit at the base of one of the most massive temple platforms in the ancient world, as if daring future generations to figure out how it was done. Was this the result of lost techniques, forgotten tools, or are we looking at the legacy of a culture with an understanding of physics, weight distribution, and manpower coordination that we've grossly underestimated? The silence from the stones offers no clues, only the echo of a question. How? If the scale and precision of the Baalbek megaliths are impressive, the purpose behind them is even more enigmatic. Despite decades of study and excavation, there is no consensus on why stones of such extraordinary size were cut, shaped, and arranged in the first place. The Romans later built temples atop the platform, most famously the Temple of Jupiter, but they inherited the foundation. That foundation, composed of the massive trilithon stones and surrounding megaliths, predates Roman engineering. Its origin remains a blank space in the historical timeline, one filled mostly with questions and speculation. Traditional archaeological interpretation suggests the megalithic platform was a foundation, a literal base upon which later religious structures were constructed. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. Why would a foundation require stones so massive they strain the limits of ancient technology? Foundations are typically buried or hidden. They don't need to be monumental. So if the goal was simply structural, the choice to use 800 to 1,000-ton blocks seems not only excessive, but irrational. Some scholars argue that the base may have had symbolic significance. In the ancient world, size was often equated with power, permanence, and divine authority. Perhaps the builders believed that only immense stones were worthy of supporting sacred temples, especially one intended for a sky god like Jupiter, or in earlier cultures, a local storm or sun deity. But even this theory struggles under the weight of its own ambition. Why not use multiple smaller blocks? Why insist on monoliths? Others suggest the site was originally part of a pre-Roman religious complex and that the massive stones were remnants of a completely different spiritual or ceremonial architecture. Unfortunately, no inscriptions, artwork, or cultural signatures have been found that would definitively tie the megaliths to a known pre-Roman civilization. This absence of context has allowed alternative theories to flourish. Some propose that Baalbek was a landing platform for ancient technologies, possibly connected to myths of sky gods or those who came from the heavens. These ideas fall outside mainstream archaeology, but reflect the frustration that so many feel when faced with enormous works of unknown intent. Others point to possible astronomical alignments, suggesting that the base may have functioned as part of a solar calendar, observatory, or cosmological map. A more grounded theory is that the site had a multi-stage history, that earlier cultures began construction for reasons now lost, and the Romans simply adapted the unfinished platform for their own purposes. This would help explain the architectural mismatch between the massive foundational stones and the more refined Roman columns and stylings above. But again, this idea is speculative, as no definitive evidence of those earlier cultures has been uncovered. Ultimately, the purpose of the Baalbek megaliths may remain unknowable. They sit at the intersection of ambition and mystery, too complex to dismiss, too silent to explain. Whether religious, astronomical, symbolic, or something stranger, their original intent has been swallowed by time. Towering above the megalithic platform of Baalbek are the ruins of one of the largest Roman temple complexes ever constructed. Grand Corinthian columns, intricate friezes, and monumental stairways tell the story of imperial ambition and architectural mastery. The Temple of Jupiter, once supported by 54 columns each over 20 meters tall, was a centerpiece of Roman engineering. But while this upper structure is stunning in its own right, it merely rests atop something even more enigmatic: a foundation of stone so massive that the Romans themselves may not have understood or been able to replicate its original construction. This mismatch between the foundation and the superstructure has puzzled historians for centuries. Roman records, so often detailed when it came to their engineering projects, offer no explanation for the origin of the megalithic base. No inscriptions mention how the trilithon stones were moved or placed. No Roman architectural treatise references this specific feat. Instead, it's as if the Romans arrived at Baalbek, found the platform already there, and chose to build upon it. That theory gains weight when examining the stylistic differences. The Roman construction, grand yet modular, relies on multiple smaller stone blocks pieced together with mortar and joints. It follows known Roman techniques seen across their empire. But the base, it consists of 3 single monoliths, each weighing over 800 tons, aligned with extraordinary precision. The contrast is stark, almost jarring. It's like discovering a modern skyscraper resting on the base of an ancient, forgotten machine. Elegant above, but mysterious below. This disconnect has led some to propose that the megalithic foundation belonged to an entirely different civilization, possibly one that existed long before the Romans, perhaps even before written history in the region. The fact that Baalbek has long been a sacred site, with occupation stretching back to the Phoenicians and even earlier, supports the idea of layered history. The Romans may have seen the immense platform as a gift from the gods, or an opportunity, too good to pass up, a ready-made base already aligned, already elevated, already commanding attention. It's worth noting that the foundation is not just practical, it's precise. The trilithon stones are not randomly placed. They form a continuous wall that appears designed to support massive weight while withstanding time and tremors. The joins between the stones are tight and the elevation is level, which suggests intentional engineering, not improvisation. And yet the culture that built it left no clear trace, no text, no image, no name. That silence is perhaps what makes Baalbek so compelling. The Roman temple tells a story of empire, gods, and grandeur, but the foundation tells a story that's older, deeper, and unresolved. It hints at a knowledge now lost, a civilization perhaps erased by time or catastrophe, and it invites a haunting possibility that we are building our history atop someone else's, without even knowing who came before. In the end, the stones remain, silent, unmoving, and undefeated by the centuries. Whatever their origin, they represent a chapter in humanity's story that we have yet to decipher and may never fully understand. Göbekli Tepe perched atop a barren hill in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe shattered everything we thought we knew about early human civilization. When it was first excavated in the 1990s, archaeologists expected to find the remnants of a modest Neolithic village. What they uncovered instead was a vast ritual complex: stone circles, T-shaped pillars weighing tons, and intricate carvings, dating back to 9600 BCE. That's over 11,000 years ago, more than 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids. And yet, it was built with a level of design and symbolism that suggests not just survival, but organized, shared vision. The carbon dating was initially met with skepticism. Could such an advanced structure really come from an era when humans were still presumed to be hunter-gatherers? At that time in history, the dominant view was that monumental architecture required settled life, agriculture, and social stratification. Göbekli Tepe defied that logic. It forced historians and archaeologists to reconsider which came first: civilization or the impulse to build something greater than oneself. What makes this site so extraordinary is its sheer antiquity combined with intentionality. These weren't natural rock formations or accidental arrangements. The builders carved towering stone pillars, some over 5 meters tall and weighing up to 20 tons, and arranged them in circular enclosures, often with 2 larger central pillars flanked by smaller ones. The scale and symmetry of these megalithic rings suggest architectural planning, communal labor, and an organized belief system. And all of this was done thousands of years before the invention of writing, the wheel, or metal tools. There's no evidence of agriculture at the site, no grain silos, no irrigation systems. That alone is baffling. How did a culture without farming feed the dozens or hundreds of people needed to design, carve, and erect such enormous stones? And why here, on a windswept hill with no clear natural advantage? The answer, it seems, is spiritual. Göbekli Tepe may be the world's first temple complex, a sacred site where people gathered seasonally or ritually to connect with something larger than themselves. What's even more mysterious is that the site wasn't just abandoned, it was intentionally buried. At some point, the builders covered the megalithic circles with tons of rubble and earth, effectively sealing them off from time. This act of preservation, intentional or otherwise, allowed the site to remain astonishingly intact for over 10 millennia. But it also adds to the enigma. Why bury something that had required so much effort to build? The discovery of Göbekli Tepe didn't just push back the timeline of complex architecture. It flipped it on its head. Rather than civilization, giving rise to religion and temples, Göbekli Tepe suggests that spirituality and shared belief may have been the catalyst that sparked civilization itself. In that sense, this ancient sanctuary may be not just a relic of the past, but the very cradle of culture. Göbekli Tepe forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Humans were capable of extraordinary complexity before the so-called pillars of civilization, agriculture, permanent settlements, and writing ever existed. This site wasn't built by farmers or scribes. It was built by hunter-gatherers, people we long assumed were too preoccupied with survival to develop religion, art, or monumental architecture. And yet, what stands atop this Turkish hill tells a different story, one of deliberate design, coordinated labor, and astonishing symbolic sophistication. At the heart of Göbekli Tepe's mystery are the massive T-shaped stone pillars, many of which weigh between 10 and 20 tons. These weren't randomly placed. They were arranged in circular enclosures, with 2 towering pillars in the center surrounded by a ring of others. The symmetry is intentional. The geometry is precise. And many of the stones are adorned with detailed carvings of animals, abstract, symbols, and humanoid forms. These weren't just decorations. They were expressions of meaning, identity, and perhaps even cosmology. How does a society with no writing system create and communicate this level of symbolic depth? The answer is still unknown. Among the carvings are fierce predators, lions, scorpions, snakes, vultures, alongside calmer creatures like ducks and bulls. These images may represent totemic symbols, seasonal markers, or mythological figures. Some researchers believe the pillars could be an early proto-language, a visual system of meaning passed down through oral traditions. More baffling still is the engineering challenge. To quarry, carve, and erect these megaliths would have required tools, coordination, and manpower that go far beyond what we typically attribute to nomadic peoples. There are no signs of the wheel, metal chisels, or pulleys, yet the builders somehow managed to lift and position massive stones upright, many over 16 feet tall. Even by today's standards, moving such loads would demand cranes or machinery. So how did they do it? Were wooden sleds used? Ramps? Ropes made of woven fiber? We don't know. No tools have been recovered at the site to confirm the method. Equally, puzzling is the absence of any domestic structures. There are no homes, no food storage pits, no hearths. Göbekli Tepe was not a village. It appears to have been built solely for ritual purposes. People may have traveled long distances to participate in ceremonies here, perhaps returning seasonally. This suggests a shared belief system strong enough to unite disparate groups, without kings, armies, or writing. That alone is revolutionary. It implies that religion and symbolism weren't byproducts of agriculture and urbanization. They may have preceded them. In fact, some archaeologists now suggest that the social cohesion required to build Göbekli Tepe may have driven humans toward settled life and farming, not the other way around. Spiritual need, not survival, may have been the first step toward civilization. In the stones of Göbekli Tepe, we don't just see carvings. We see the birth of abstract thought, collective identity, and sacred architecture, all long before anyone grew a crop or wrote a word. Who built Göbekli Tepe? It's a question that has echoed across decades of excavation and inquiry, and one that still defies a clear answer. There is no known name for the people who constructed it. No texts, no tombs, no legends etched in stone to tell us their story. And yet, what they left behind is undeniable. An organized, highly skilled effort to raise a massive sanctuary out of raw earth and rock. But if they weren't farmers, city dwellers, or state societies, how did they do it? The builders of Göbekli Tepe lived in a time before cities, before central governments, before armies or priesthoods. They were mobile foragers, likely moving with the seasons, tracking herds of gazelle, gathering wild grains, and surviving through knowledge of the land. Yet these same people managed to coordinate large-scale construction involving multi-ton stone pillars, precise planning, and shared artistic motifs. The very scale of Göbekli Tepe indicates a level of social cooperation and planning that was thought impossible for nomadic groups. This wasn't the work of a handful of people. It required dozens, maybe hundreds of workers. That suggests leadership of some form, whether charismatic, religious, or communal. Did certain individuals emerge as spiritual figures, able to rally others through ritual or myth? Or did early belief systems instill a sense of shared duty strong enough to motivate people across clans or territories? Equally mysterious is why they built it. The absence of domestic life at the site points to a singular function: ritual. Göbekli Tepe appears to have been a place of worship, ceremony, or spiritual convergence. Some believe it served as a seasonal meeting ground where disparate groups gathered to share knowledge, perform rites, and perhaps even exchange mates, maintaining social bonds across wide regions. The carvings themselves, predatory animals, abstract shapes, and composite creatures, hint at a symbolic world rich in myth and meaning. Vultures, for example, are a recurring motif and may represent death, rebirth, or the soul's journey. Other images, such as headless figures or scorpions, could be tied to early cosmologies. What's clear is that this was a sacred landscape, designed to engage both the senses and the spirit. But how was such a complex project organized without writing, contracts, or a formal labor force? One theory suggests a proto-religious structure, where building became an act of devotion, an offering to the gods or ancestors. Another posits that communal labor was part of ritual itself, that the process of building was as sacred as the structure it produced. Labor may have been seasonal, aligning with celestial events or food surpluses that freed people from daily survival tasks. Göbekli Tepe stands as proof that even in the absence of cities or states, human imagination and collective belief were powerful enough to shape stone and history. Its builders had no scripts or monuments to themselves, but they left behind a structure that challenges every assumption about the origins of organized society. The construction of Göbekli Tepe without cities, formal governance, or written language doesn't just challenge the idea of early human organization, it reshapes it. This wasn't an accidental gathering of scattered stones. It was a sustained, multi-generational project requiring planning, shared labor, and above all, a common worldview powerful enough to unite communities that otherwise lived transient, disconnected lives. In essence, Göbekli Tepe may have been one of humanity's first great social unifiers, a cultural and spiritual anchor that predates urban life. Without bureaucracies, what held this effort together? The answer may lie in the most primal force of all, shared belief. Belief that certain places were sacred, that certain symbols carried power, that life was governed by forces beyond what was visible. In a world without cities, temples like Göbekli Tepe may have served as nodes of cultural gravity, places where people from different regions gathered for ritual, storytelling, and renewal. Some researchers have suggested that the very act of building Göbekli Tepe was a form of ritual. Hauling limestone slabs, carving intricate reliefs, raising pillars in concentric circles, each task may have been imbued with spiritual meaning. These weren't laborers in the modern sense. They were participants in a ceremonial act. Every groove carved into stone may have been a prayer, every lifted block a gesture toward the divine. And while there were no cities, there were certainly networks. Archaeological evidence suggests the people around Göbekli Tepe shared tools, artistic styles, and perhaps even myths with neighboring regions. These ties may have formed the earliest ritual-based alliances, paving the way for what would eventually become political and economic networks. In that light, Göbekli Tepe wasn't isolated. It was connected, perhaps even central, to a spiritual map that stretched across the prehistoric Near East. The site's complexity also hints at an evolving organization. The oldest layers of Göbekli Tepe contain the largest and most ornate structures. Later phases show smaller, less ambitious designs. This suggests a long-term shift in cultural energy, perhaps from awe-inspiring communal projects to more localized, less centralized practices. Or it may reflect changes in leadership, environment, or belief itself. Some experts think Göbekli Tepe may have played a role in ushering in the Neolithic Revolution, the transition from foraging to farming, not as a byproduct, but as a precursor. People may have come together to build and worship, and only later began to settle nearby, domesticating plants and animals to support their spiritual gatherings. When the site was ultimately buried, intentionally, as evidence suggests, it marked the end of an era. But its legacy endured. The idea that humans could gather around a shared idea, could build something that reached toward the eternal. That seed would take root across time and continents. Cities would come. Writing would follow. But long before them stood Göbekli Tepe, a temple built by those with no kings, no cities, and no books, only belief. For every ancient enigma we investigate, 10 more rise from the dust, staring back at us with silent defiance. The deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes. These sites weren't just built from stone, they were built from questions. Questions about purpose, about power, about where we come from, and where we're headed. Each monument, each mystery, stands as a quiet rebellion against the idea that we've figured it all out. Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek, Yonaguni, they don't just challenge the timeline of history. They challenge the limits of our imagination. They force us to ask not just how these wonders were built, but why. And in that why, we're not just searching for our ancestors. we're searching for ourselves. Science will keep asking. Archaeologists will keep digging. New technologies may bring us closer to the truth. But maybe, just maybe, not every mystery wants to be solved. Some are meant to be experienced, not explained. Some are here to remind us that even in a world of data, algorithms, and high-speed answers, wonder still exists, and that's a mystery worth preserving.